Good afternoon, guys. Hopefully you are having a wonderful Friday, and congratulations, you made it through the week, so kudos to you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to start with a couple of announcements here before we get started. Guys, there was a lot to talk about today, from the heat wave to Category 4 Hurricane Hilary. For some reason, I keep wanting to say Katrina. I hope I don't say that during the video. Hurricane Hilary, which is a Category 4 storm. We even have some other weather phenomena to talk about, including the return of some wildfire smoke into the region. I know it's sort of lost and been buried into the headlines, but that's one of a couple of other weather headlines that have sort of been lost in translation due to the two major storylines here of Hurricane Hilary and the potential historic heat wave that will be impacting the central United States as we get into early next week. I want to start first by thanking our subscribers from yesterday. So we had quite a few of you join onto the channel, so thank you so much for doing so. It really means a lot from the bottom of my heart that you guys continue to support the channel, and a lot of great feedback from you guys, so thank you for that. We will continue to provide daily uploads with the exception of tomorrow. I will not have a YouTube video tomorrow. I will be kind of running around all day, so I won't have a chance to be by my computer. But Sunday afternoon, I do anticipate me putting up a new video, and I think it's really going to be related to the heavy rainfall that we expect out of Hurricane Hilary that will be impacting California. We're going to be talking a little bit about that later on, as I do expect that to be the main hazard with this storm system. So stay tuned for that. But just want to let you know, programming note, we will not be doing a video tomorrow, but we will be resuming daily uploads beginning on Sunday and then going through the rest of the work week. The other thing I wanted to mention is, just like with yesterday's video, I am going to divide this up into chapters. So if you're looking to get more coverage relating to Hurricane Hilary, then this is going to be sort of that first chapter of the video. But if you're looking more for the U.S. Whiparound, when we start talking about the heat wave, feel free to move around, meander through the video, and kind of pick and choose, right? Because we're going to be really extensively covering a little bit of everything today. So if you're not interested in the tropical system and you're more concerned about the heat wave beginning early next week, you can go ahead and skip to that later on in the video. If you're looking for the U.S. Whiparound, you can certainly jump to that too. And of course, if you want to talk about the Hurricane Hilary, which is now, again, a Category 4, we're going to be talking about that here right now. Just want to give you guys a heads up. That's going to be the video format going forward. And of course, if you have any feedback from me, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. All that aside, here we go. Again, it's going to be a jam-packed video, a lot to discuss. And we're going to start first with Category 4 Hurricane Hilary. Currently, sustained winds of 145 miles per hour, and this is continuing to move off to the northwest here at 10 miles per hour. We do expect this to make landfall as a hurricane just to the south of the California-Mexico border. Once it really starts to interact with land, in particularly higher elevations, it is going to start to get sheared out due to the friction of the surface as well as the cooler waters as it continues to move northward. So my hunch and also my anticipation is that Hurricane Hilary will make landfall in California as a tropical storm. It certainly has a lot of strength behind it. Again, these waters out in the Pacific are very warm, so I still anticipate it making landfall as a tropical storm, with winds anywhere between 39 to upwards of 65 miles per hour. Now, that's not going to be the biggest concern of it all. As a matter of fact, the main hazard, in my opinion, that I think a lot of people in California should be concerned about is the heavy rainfall. I'm going to do something on this channel that I usually don't do, and that is pull up the Weather Prediction Center, because I had a chance before we started the video today to really look at the flooding discussion. So the day 3, this takes us out to August 20th. Keep in mind they have a moderate risk for flooding for portions of Southern California starting on the 19th, which would be tomorrow. But for the 20th, they have introduced a high risk of excessive rainfall for San Diego, just to the east of Los Angeles, and then back towards the Nevada and California border, out towards the eastern portion of the valley. Now, I read through the bio, and I really think you guys should take a quick look at this, because this is, out of all the discussions I've seen, one of the most strongly worded forecast discussions out of the Weather Prediction Center that I've ever really read through. Here's the big part. So first part of it says a large area of precipitable water values of 1.75 to 2.5 inches will approach, if not exceed, all-time records. So there will be moisture to spare. Guys, 2.5 inches of precipitable water is a crap ton for Southern California. Even in your most significant atmospheric river events, to have a threshold like that out of any tropical system that makes its way into California, that is incredibly rare. And if that didn't paint the picture for you, wait till you get to the bottom of this discussion. The NAEFS is indicating IVT values. By the way, IVT stands for Integrated Vapor Transport. It has values 14.8 sigmas above the mean. Now, if you remember yesterday, I gave you guys a little bit of a statistics lesson when we were talking about sigma, right? And we were talking about that in relation to the potential heat wave for next week. But in this case, they're using standard deviation with respect to IVT. 15 standard deviations above the mean. If you were to draw that out as a normal distribution curve, so this is just statistics 101, guys, right? So here's sort of the tails of your curve. If you're putting 15 standard deviations above a mean, in a normal distribution, this is your mean, right? So here's my mean. And the forecast is for 15 standard deviations of IVT above the mean. That would be at the upper thresholds of your normal distribution curve. I hate to get math with you guys, but mathy. I hate to get mathy with you guys, if that's even a word, but I wanted to show this to you to really underscore how incredibly rare this rainfall event is, especially for Nevada too. We didn't really highlight that yesterday, but it's important to note that places like Las Vegas seeing even this type of rainfall is incredibly rare in of itself too. So it also goes on to say that there is the 100-year ARI is forecasted to be exceeded, and also it goes on to say that if a 7+ maximum materialized over Mount Charleston Sunday into early Monday, it would challenge Nevada's 24-hour rainfall record set in 2004. The other value I wanted to turn your attention to, though, is that there is also the potential for 3-inch amounts in an hour. So literally 3+ inches of rain per hour. Right? I mean, think of your most saturated environments in the lower 48, like the Gulf of Mexico, for example. That kind of rainfall, is usually associated with these tropical systems. For that to be occurring in California, again, producing this type of moisture, right, that has to be precipitated, that is incredibly rare. So take a shot, well, if you are of age, take a shot every time I have said incredibly rare. Again, if you are legally allowed to drink. Because it really is. I mean, this is a fascinating thing we're going to be seeing and witnessing in Southern California. And so we will of course continue to monitor that and find out what these total rainfalls come out to be. But look, it would not be out of the question, I do agree with the Weather Prediction Center, to see rainfall amounts of 3 inches per hour. I mean, it honestly would not shock me. But let's start by taking a look here at COD, and we're going to start with the models. I mean, we'll go back to our whip around here in the United States in just a second. There's a lot to talk about there too, so bear with me here. But we're going to start first with our rainfall amounts, and we're going to take a look beginning with the NAM-NES. So we'll go down to Southern California. We'll take a look at the total precip accumulation. This should give us an idea here. And as you can see, look at those rainfall amounts. This takes us all the way into what would be 18Z, or excuse me, 6Z. So this is all the way out into the overnight hours of Monday. Look at these rainfall amounts, 13 inches, 11, 12, 10, 11. So we could have some orographic enhanced rainfall amounts. Now keep in mind, this is the NAM-NEST, and I have seen the NAM-NEST in many cases overdue rainfall amounts. So before we jump the gun, let's take a look at the HRRR, and it's only going to go out to 48 hours, but at least tells the tale. And the HRRR is also showing those kinds of amounts, already seeing 6 to 7 inches, and that's of 18Z Sunday. So it's not even accounting for the peak rainfall, which will be towards Sunday afternoon and evening. So very extreme rainfall amounts getting back down in Mexico. Higher elevations are seeing anywhere between 10 to 14 inches of rain. This is certainly not out of the question, but we are going to be a little bit conservative here. I would actually side anywhere between 6 to 10 inches at the moment of rainfall for a lot of Southern California. Again, I know a lot of the models, especially with the CAMs, the NamNest and the HRRR, are showing rainfall amounts very in elevated numbers when you get up into the higher elevations. But what I will say is on the conservative end for Southern California, I would anticipate anywhere between 6 to even 12 inches of rainfall. That's just really the conservative end of it. I don't want to be siding with these aggressive numbers right away. It certainly wouldn't surprise me being at higher elevations and you get that orographic influence, but we will have to wait and see and check the models tomorrow and see if it's still locking in on those numbers. But otherwise, however way you want to spin it, ladies and gentlemen, it is still going to produce a ton of rain in this area. And if you remember from yesterday, we have portions of southeastern California that are under drought conditions still. And it's not exceptional drought, but it is still moderate drought. So that is something to consider. We certainly could have a lot of runoff with this, and certainly some flash flooding in spots. And by the way, even for areas that do have a saturated soil and water table, here's the issue. If you have 3 inches of rain falling per hour in spots, wherever that's falling at that intensity is going to get the brunt of it in terms of flash flooding. It's not going to be enough to absorb right away. That's very heavy rainfall in a short period of time. It doesn't allow for the soil to absorb a lot of that. So you are going to get ponding and runoff either way, whether you're in drought conditions right now or you're not. But certainly the ones that are going to be impacted the most are currently in drought conditions. And I want to acknowledge that, southeastern California is a more desert-like climate, so it's not out of the question to see these kind of dry conditions. And as a matter of fact, it's not even the worst drought we've seen. It's improved drought conditions in contrast to last year. But as I've said, the drought conditions are still there, and that can certainly lead to some flash flooding. So, look, there's going to be certainly a wind component. Let's take a look at that on the NAM and show you guys how this thing makes landfall. And we'll look here a little bit towards the surface at our 925. And as you can see, the center, which is located right off the coast of San Diego, here's your center of that system. Watch it rapidly weaken as it works into California, right? Because you got to deal with cooler waters. You're also dealing with rough terrain, and that is a recipe for that storm to just get absolutely sheared apart. But because it is weakening from a Category 4 down to a tropical storm, it still has a lot of juice left in terms of moisture content. So, as I said before, I think the initial threat is going to be those damaging winds sustained anywhere between 30 to 60 miles per hour. And then really the main threat becomes the flash flooding component that's going to be impacting Eastern California. As we said at the top of the video, we are going to be talking more about this in depth on Sunday as it impacts California. We'll be showing you the radar, showing you the latest numbers and who's experiencing the worst conditions, and of course model that out for the rest of the evening into Monday. So you want to stay tuned for that. Sunday's video is going to be primarily focused on Tropical Storm Hilary, as well as the other tropical systems we'll have to keep an eye on here in the Atlantic. Let's now transition, though, in the meantime, to our COD page and show you what's going on in the rest of the country. When these major weather events happen, it's really difficult for, the whole picture to be painted here. But we can't forget about other things that are happening in the country. So we're going to start first with the Northeast. We talked about this yesterday as well. You have this occluding low that's located right now over central Quebec, continuing to move off to the east, and also providing some relatively strong winds on the backed flow side of it. So your cold front, which is backdoor, has moved off to the east at this point, and this is now sort of the backwash of westerly flow that is moving over the Poconos and getting into upstate New York and portions of New England. So certainly, if you are out in this area of New England in the Northeast today, it certainly was a windy day. It was rather cooler as well, But that, of course, is going to be temporary. I do expect these temperatures to be slightly above average once we get into next week. So again, these cooler than average temperatures are only here for a bit, and then we are going to gradually see temperatures warm up going into next week. I will say, though, it's not going to be anything like the heat that the central United States are going to deal with, but I think you're going to start to see your temperatures become more summer-like. And also, I would expect for next week, and we'll take a look at the models here towards the end, but as we talked about, when you have this ridge that sets up in the central United States, sort of a ring of fire pattern, it essentially displaces your jet flow to the north, and it sort of creates an arc. And when it comes crashing down on the eastern periphery of that ridge, it does typically produce some jet perturbations and in some cases some low pressure systems that can produce some active weather. So you may be seeing an active pattern going into next week, periods throughout the week. It's not going to be, active every single day, but I think you are going to see some windows of opportunity for some showers and storms as we go into next week. So we're going to watch that space very closely. At the moment, the Storm Prediction Center does not have anything outlook for severe weather yet, but we will keep a close eye on that as we get closer to next week. Looking at the Mid-Atlantic states, same situation. You got this backed flow coming up from Canada, and that's producing some cooler temperatures as well. And you can see these little cumulus clouds. If we get a little bit closer, something to really look at, rather cool. These are what we call horizontal convective rolls. And what these are is they're essentially little cumulus clouds that either are formed from warm air advection from either the Gulf or the Atlantic, or are formed from very strong backed flow that moves over a higher terrain. So you notice that a lot of this horizontal convective roll action is predominantly over areas of higher elevation along the Appalachian mountain chain. So we see a lot of that taking place here in South Carolina, North Carolina, even back into Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama. But if we take a look at the radar, how much of that is actually precipitating? Not much at all, because you really don't have much forcing aloft. If you actually look at the station plots, for example, just to kind of sum this all up, look at your wind flow, right? It's almost backed in many portions of the mid-Atlantic. So you don't have a lot of moisture advection here. You don't really have much of a lifting source per se. So because of that and other factors, you're not seeing these clouds really turn into any sort of convection or showers and storms. So wanted to highlight that for you guys on satellite, and this is all thanks to College of DuPage, which is a wonderful website. I strongly recommend you guys use it. The link will also be down in the bio below. Let's now zoom out to the rest of the country. Over towards the southeast, we have an area of showers and thunderstorms that looks to be impacting Florida. Very much clustered, and this is just your typical afternoon convection, some sea breeze influence here. These storms will, of course, just like what Florida does, they will last for the next couple of hours and then eventually dissipate as we go into the evening, but could see some heavy downpours with that, even some bouts of severe weather as well, albeit very isolated at times. So you want to be on the lookout for that, especially for our friends near Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, and then back into Miami Beach and South Beach. So otherwise, very isolated for the severe weather threat, but the rainfall is certainly widespread. And we will see that continue throughout the afternoon and continue to go into this evening. Taking a look now at the Midwest, this will be the storyline for the heat wave, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But the one thing I want to show you guys to start that is not really making headlines right now is the wildfire smoke. I don't know if you guys can actually see it, but you see this trail right here that extends from Indiana back into Minnesota, right? This is essentially wildfire smoke in the upper levels of the atmosphere along that jet stream that's being transported down from British Columbia. One of the stories making headlines up in Canada is that there's been a mass evacuation of folks in British Columbia and in the Northern Territories due to, once again, extensive wildfires. So we are seeing some rather poor air quality yet again for areas like Wisconsin, back into Minnesota, and the lower Great Lakes. There are air quality alerts out for Wisconsin. There are none out for Northern Illinois at the moment, so it's very limited in terms of the air quality alerts. But if you are in the unhealthy category, if you have breathing issues or heart issues, you certainly want to avoid any extraneous activities outside, especially over the next day or so. And as that ridge continues to build, we should expect to see that wildfire smoke meander out of the area and impact other folks downstream. So this is a temporary thing that we're seeing in terms of the haze. Again, I do expect this air quality to improve, but the downside of that is we are going to see some very, very hot temperatures. So in a way, the air quality won't necessarily improve in that respect, but in terms of breathing in and inhaling the wildfire smoke and the haze, that will, of course, improve over time. But that is certainly an issue for folks in the Midwest today. Didn't really get talked about as much, and it's understandable, because you got a hurricane out in the Pacific, you got a heat wave to talk about. So some of these, major storylines that would have been major storylines sort of get lost in the cards. But I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that for you guys. And that even extends into Iowa, also for some folks in the plains back towards the Missouri River Valley. So a large swath of the central United States dealing with some poor air quality. If you look up at the sky today and it looks a little hazy, that's exactly why, right? You're dealing with some pretty potent wildfire smoke. And then finally, back towards the Pacific Northwest, you do have a lot in the way of convection, and you can thank the current jet pattern for that, which seems to be a broken record for you folks in the Rockies and even getting back into the Northwest and the West Coast. So if we go ahead and put on our 500 millibar jet overlay, you can actually see this play out, right? Here is your current ridge that's eventually going to expand northward with time, and you get this clockwise flow that moves over the mountains. So that air, again, that's Gulf moisture that's being evected northwestward into the Rockies. As that moves on the windward side, that parcel is going to become saturated, and then it's going to precipitate and condensate. So it's going to condensate, then precipitate, but it's going to be enhanced by the orographic lifting. So that is why we're seeing widespread scattered showers and thunderstorms across much of the central and northern Rockies today. And that's going to continue to be the case at least going into the weekend as this ridge continues to move off to the northeast. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, just like we also said yesterday, here's your shortwave trough. Here is your ridge, and then finally here is another shortwave feature off the coast of California, not producing much precip at the surface, but here in the central and northern valley you are seeing some convection initiating. Same concept, except for this particular system, unlike what we're seeing in the Rockies, right, we don't have Gulf moisture with this system. This is actually Pacific moisture that's being advected northward due to that counterclockwise rotation and associated with the trough. So you have Gulf moisture advection for the Rockies producing precip. You got Pacific moisture advection coming up into the California valleys at higher elevations. And then back towards the east, you got the occluded low, you have convection near Florida, and then you have the wildfire smoke encompassing much of the central U.S. So there is a lot going on in this map. And of course, down towards the south, you have Hurricane Hilary. So, last but not least, we are going to take a look at the latest in relation to the heat wave that will be impacting the central United States. We've been alluding to that quite a few times this video. We also have been talking about it the last couple of videos here. Let's start first with the GEFS 500 millibar jet. And we'll just show this one last time. I don't expect much change with this. Let's take a look first. And as you can see, this is, by the way, let me just move this over here, as of 12Z Sunday. So this is getting into Sunday morning. Watch this ridge really build. Those are height rises we're talking about. And look at that. Really sits and parks all throughout the week, getting into Thursday before we see a little bit of a jet collapse in terms of your ridge kind of contracting back into the southern half of the U.S. So once we get out to this timestamp again, it has been showing this jet maxima to the north in the northern Great Lakes. It's still very far out, so it really remains to be seen on what happens with this, but this could certainly lead to the potential for some severe weather for portions of the Northeast and New England getting into next week. So watch that space. We'll keep a close eye on it, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about that going into next week. It's still very far out, so a lot of things still to be worked out, but this type of solution would not surprise me at all because it's very common to see something like this when you have your heat dome eventually contracting and getting back into the southern half of the United States. Either way, this heat wave is pretty much on a synoptic scale going to impact the central part of the country, right? It's still showing very high thickness values and essentially these strong height rises. So that certainly tells us that this is going to be an expansive heat wave that encompasses much of this region. Let's take a look at the NAM as well and see what the temperatures come out to be. Now, we are going to skip away from the GFS because it has been quite aggressive with temperatures. Let's just take a look at what the NAM is showing, and this gets into 6Z, right? So currently it's showing temperatures in the 100s easily for the Central Plains. Now, I did see this afternoon that the National Weather Service has put out excessive heat watches and warnings for a lot of this area beginning next week, and we could see heat indices get well north of 110 in some spots. The NAM does not show it because it's not going as far out, but we do expect this heat to eventually expand into portions of Chicago, getting up towards Milwaukee and northwest Indiana once we get into the middle of next week. I think the worst time for you guys is going to be Wednesday and Thursday when we really start to see that center of the ridge essentially park itself right over northern and north central Illinois. We'll take a look at the Euro too and see, and the Euro and the NAM still are in very strong agreement in terms of temperatures. If you go back here, it does show Chicago being in the 100s as we get into Wednesday. So as I mentioned, Wednesday's probably going to be the worst time for you guys. Wednesday and Thursday in particular for the lower Great Lakes. For the rest of you, especially in the south, 109, 106 back towards the plains, and even into the south central United States, this heat is going to really essentially encompass much of the work week from Monday into Thursday. So the Euro and the NAM are in very strong agreement. Finally, we'll take a look here at the GFS, and I mean, it is the most aggressive, right? 118, 113, 117, 117. So I don't expect that high of temperatures, but to see 100s all about, I certainly would expect that. So the GFS has been uptrending these numbers, but I will say that it has been very aggressive, just like it has been the last couple of days. So I'm currently still going to stick with the temperature spread being anywhere between 99 degrees to 110 degrees for much of the Midwest. So as I mentioned at the top of the video, that is, we will be talking about the Hurricane Hilary coverage on Sunday. Sorry, I had a total brain fart. My apologies. We'll be talking about Hurricane Hilary on Sunday, and we'll be doing sort of a video relating to the impacts in California, giving you guys the latest on that. There will not be an upload tomorrow, but again, that upload you can expect on Sunday relating to the tropical system impacting California. And then as we do our daily uploads throughout early next week, we will give you guys updates relating to this historic heat wave that will be impacting this region of the country, the much of the central United States. And we'll also be taking a look at that point, the latest relating to the Atlantic. It's starting to heat up, starting to get very active. It remains to be seen on if any of the storms are going to be impacting the coastline. So we'll keep you guys all updated as we get into next week. But other than that, I will see you guys on Sunday. Hopefully you have a great rest of your weekend. Be sure to like and subscribe, share with family and friends as a reminder, and be sure to check out Prestige Weather's Consulting. You can check that out here in our website, which is in the description down below. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on Sunday.